time. We'll just do the very best we can. You know, try to get as much of it as we possibly can. But before we get started, what I'd like to do is I would like to read something for you. If you want to follow along, it's chapter 10 of John. It's the shepherd and his flock. By the way, Gary and I are not coordinating everything. It sounds like it when he preaches and when I do this. We're really not coordinating that. It's just that there are legitimate passages that he's using to show how that works and that kind of stuff. Because I imagine you're sitting there saying, "Oh, we went over that." That's how it works. So anyway, if you go to chapter 10, okay, and basically we're going to talk about later, if we can get to all of it today, the shepherd and his flock. And it goes like this: I tell you the truth. The man who does not enter the sheep gate by the gate, but climbs in some other way, is a thief and a robber. The man who enters the gate is the shepherd of his sheep. The watchman opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all of his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Jesus used this figure of speech, but they did not understand what he was telling them. Therefore, Jesus said again, I tell you the truth. I am the gate for the sheep. And whoever came before me were thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. He will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that you may have life and have it more abundantly. We'll talk about this a little bit more. I was going to read more of that story to you, the rest of that story, but we have it in other passages. But with that opening, let's pray and then talk a little bit about last week. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this really great opportunity to be here and to study and to think about your word and how it applies to our life. We just ask that you care for us throughout the week like you have promised, and that you help us to know that you are real and you are involved in our lives, that you know what's going on. And we thank you for Jesus, and we thank you for everything that he is becoming to mean for us. We're looking to him, we're looking to you to show us the true gospel. Thank you for John, and thank you for inspiring him through your Holy Spirit, so that we may have this record and this information. Be with us now and help to illuminate our minds as well as our hearts as we begin in our lesson today. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay. How did the chapter titles go? Anybody do them?
Well,
Good. A lot of you did it. Good. Okay.
well, there was multiple portions, so you couldn't put it all in just a couple of words.
Well, sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. You're right.
Right.
Yeah, it's hard sometimes. But tell me, what chapter 1? What'd you call it?
I called it God Created, John's Story, Intro to Jesus, and Met the Disciples.
Excellent. Y'all agree with that? Yeah. Pretty much, that's what's there. Right. Okay. How about 3? Who did 3?
Eternal life is belief in the Son.
Okay, eternal life is belief in the Son. All right? Now, what do you think about that?
Yeah.
I put more of like an observation of Jesus talks with Nicodemus and then John steps back into his ministry. Or steps back in his ministry.
Jesus talks with Nicodemus and John does what?
Steps back in his ministry, like just when he says, I must decrease and that he might increase.
Okay.
I think that's it.
What does someone else?
I'm born again from heaven, and only good was coming from heaven.
Okay, all right. Anybody else? I'm interested in this one in Nicodemus because this is, the chapter 3 is pretty critical to the book.
I put salvation through Jesus Christ.
What did you say?
Salvation through Jesus Christ.
Salvation through Jesus Christ. Okay, all right. Anybody else?
I just put Nicodemus, I put several things.
All right.
Nicodemus dash must be born again, so that's what he said. And then I put a couple more. God sent his son so that the world might be saved through him. And then John the Baptist exalts Christ as Lord, because that was all covered in chapter 3.
Okay.
I like my chapter titles so that I can look at them and I can, if I'm looking for a particular story, I can find it in.
Right. So you're trying to make it memorable for you,
Yeah.
so that when you're thinking about where did I have that in the Bible? Oh yeah, that's 3. Yeah.
I'm trying to look at the chart.
I'm trying to please me and not somebody else.
Yeah. By the way, if you have your John chart, get it out. We're going to talk about it anyway. It'd be good to just have it there. Put it right up in front of you. All right. What about 5? What do we have in 5?
Sent by God.
Sent by God. Okay. What happened in 5?
Jesus persecuted for healing on the Sabbath.
Okay. That happened in 5. Anybody else? 5?
Jesus heals a man at the pool in Jerusalem,
Right?
and Jesus says nothing other than a cliff.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else? What about 10?
Jews accused Jesus of blasphemy.
Right?
He and the Father were one.
All right.
Or one. And they give a reference of Psalm 2:7.
All right.
James, maybe explain how you wanted us to use the chart to guide us with those
Well,
titles.
I'm going to do that, but I was kind of listening to what they were saying first. But she's got a good point. When you look at your title chapters, okay, and you're looking, when I'm talking about 10, I'm talking about right here. What's going on between 5 and 11?
Opposition.
Yeah.
The Jews were against what Jesus had to say.
So mostly what your title chapters are going to talk about are that opposition. And that kind of gives you some guidance as to what you would say. If you were to say, your chapter title would be, Jesus talks about going to heaven, that wouldn't quite fit there, would it? So you have to look at your title and see, with this chart, whether or not that makes any sense. What about, what do you have for 11?
2 words.
2 words?
Jesus wept.
Jesus. Okay. I can't argue with that, that's in there.
Verse 35.
Okay, that's right, all right. 11, anybody else?
Jesus revives Lazarus.
There you go.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely there. That was a sore spot with a lot of people.
Yeah, well, they didn't want to kill Lazarus, because that was a proof of
Yes,
it.
I remember that, that's amazing. Yeah, okay. Anything else?
The Jews plot to kill Jesus.
The Jews plotted to kill Jesus. Right. what about 21? Anybody get that far? 21?
Jesus
I just
appears
put
to
it-
his disciples.
I just put that he interacts with his apostle, or
With
disciples.
his disciples? Yeah, he does. He interacts with these disciples. Basically, what you got going here is a reinstatement of Peter. As you'll find as we go through here, Peter gets really upset,
He gets asked 3 times.
and he and 7 other guys decide they're going to go back to fishing. And they go back to fishing. So Jesus makes another appearance. Hello, Patrick. How's it going? It's going good. I think we're late. All right, so they have a reinstatement. Then we have John, the disciple. And the reason we have John, the disciple, is that there was a, did you catch the little kind of skirmish there between Peter and John? Did you catch that?
Maybe
Yeah.
a second set.
What was that about? Anybody remember? Now, John, you wouldn't know because you're John. Okay, cool.
It seemed like, somehow, I didn't really catch that in the thing, but there was a deal about Peter being, how he was gonna die or something like that,
Yeah.
which I didn't pick up, but I guess that was in there.
Well, it was in there. It was in there.
And then Jesus is basically saying, well, what about John, you know, what's his name, basically?
Yeah.
And he says, well, if I want to keep him around, I'll keep him around. It's up
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah, what's it to you? He's gonna live
Not
until I
you.
return, you know? Well, what do you think happened there? What's your best guess?
Want to be the #1 guy.
What happened there is exactly what happens to us, you know? Now, wait a minute. I thought I was the #1 man. I just got reinstated here, okay? And now, you know, you're up there walking with John and whispering in his ear. You know, what's going on? So, anyway, that's what happened. What happened was, it was a very, very touchy situation, and Jesus let Peter know, in no uncertain terms, you got enough to worry about. You worry about Peter. You don't need to worry about John. If I want John to live forever, that's fine. What's that to you? It doesn't matter, you know.
James, wasn't the description of them running to the empty tomb, they also competed on who made it there first?
Yeah,
Sure.
that was
right?
funny.
Sure.
John's
They
like,
sure
yeah, I
did.
made it faster than him.
Yeah. Who's the fastest here?
Yeah.
Who's one Jesus talks to the most? You know? All that was going on. Go ahead,
I
Pat.
think this is on the same line of thinking, but essentially there was one part that stuck out to me the most reading through the
Okay.
Gospel of John, and that was when Jesus, it says he knew what was in the heart of man,
Yes.
and so he didn't entrust himself to the people who
Yes.
basically,
Yes.
and so I think that's tangential, and it's going back to what you said, where it's kind of in all of us, in a sense, to want to be glorified, be #1, be the right-hand man, be all this stuff, right? And so, and then all these people, even up to the road to Emmaus, these people had this idea that the Christ is coming,
Uh-huh.
the kingdom of God is coming in a way that they thought was like a political,
Yes.
A
They were still
political-
holding that Jewish idea. You're right. Yeah,
Yeah.
they did. And they still thought the same thing. That's interesting. Well, what's this tell you about the disciples?
they're human.
They're very human, yeah. What else does it tell you about them? Not only did they compete with each other, and they have their little things going on, but
Took them a long time to believe, even though they were with them.
it does take them a long time to believe, yeah. If you remember, back in the Old Testament, we talked about God choosing Abraham. Remember that? And I said to you, why would he pick this nomad out in the middle of the desert, you know, whose father made idols, you know, and decide to orchestrate his entire plan of justification by faith and a lot of other things with this man?
So
Who
we
are
get
these disciples? They have professions. One's a doctor, another guy's got some other things going. You know, a tax collector,
Fisherman.
you know, a fisherman and businessman, you know, that kind of stuff. But basically, who are these guys?
every day?
Huh? Every day. What kind of chumps? They're people that are ordinary people, have ordinary jobs. You know, he sees them as people like, and they have interesting levels of belief, which we'll talk about later. Gary gave you a big hint on one this morning. But it's interesting how these guys believe and what they think, you know. And so Jesus did not go to the temple and pluck the chief priest and a few others to be his disciples, did he? Well, even Nicodemus. No. He went with you and me, which I think is interesting, you know. So that's the way he does things. He does things differently. And you'll find in this particular area here that's coming up, he's going to do a lot of things differently. The next thing I want to talk to you about is, just briefly, is our homework assignment for next time. What we're doing now is we're taking another step. Let me go back here and take a look at this. All of you should have a handout given to you today, which is, it says, kinds of relationships and questions. See that? Pull that out and let me just share a few things. And you have your chart out too? Keep your chart out here, okay? Because now we're going to look at the bottom of the chart. Last couple of weeks we were looking at the top of the chart. Now we're going to go down to the bottom, okay? And look at some of the literary relationships that structure John's book. If you look here, you have these funny words like causation, particularization. You have over here points of cruciality. You have your contrast, and then you have building to a climax in the book. These are just some of the ones that help structure that book and put it together. What these pages do for you is they allow you to look for some of these things. And Gary today said, look, there's that word so. So means a result. You know, this is a result. Where do you get that? Okay.
Like a therefore.
It's a comparison. A therefore is what? A causation. Okay. So what you need, that means there's a cause and an effect. Now what I want to do is go real slow with this. I want you to feel comfortable with it. So I'm going to do the hard ones, and you're going to do the easy ones. Okay? So on the homework assignment, what I'd like you to do is I would like you to circle the ones here that I want you to look for. As you read through the Gospel of John, I want you to look for, number one, comparisons. Now what's a comparison? It's the association of like things. You'll see it when you see a word like also, as so, just as, so, also, likewise. If you see any of those, just get it. You know, circle it, say comparison. Now along with that, I would like you to ask some questions. Now I'm not saying you should do 50 of these. Okay, just go through the Gospel of John and pick out a few, you know, and that you can do. And ask these questions. Because what we're going to do now is we're going to move from observation. Remember, all this has been observing what's there, reading what's there, okay? Now we're going to start down the road of interpreting what's there. And to interpret, you have to see structure. And to see structure, you have to be able to know what that means. So we're going to go after textual words. That's the first way we're going to do it. It's easier to go after words. It helps you to see things. Because you write, when I'm up here talking to you and I say an entire sentence, I don't believe anybody here says, oh, he said therefore. Oh, look at that, he said but. You don't do that, do it. That's not how we think, okay? But when you apply that to Scripture, and you see it there, and you see the word but, all of a sudden you realize, or much and although, there's a contrast here. There's a contrast going on, okay? So now when you see these, I want you to go after comparisons, contrasts, preparation and introduction, it's number 6, and summarization, number 7.
Say that again.
Okay. 1, 2, 6, and 7. So just circle those. That's what I want you to look for when you read through. Now don't force yourself. You know what I mean? I just want you to read through the book, and if you see something that sounds like the background or a setting given with regard to events or ideas, let me give you a good example of that. There's a small one within a paragraph that talks about Jesus who's meditating outside the temple there, and the Pharisees come with a woman that was caught in adultery, right? Okay? Now, what are they going to do? They're going to ask him a bunch of questions, and they're going to, John is kind of setting you up. He's preparing you. He's giving you some insight, some information. Okay? So it's kind of an introduction to what's going to happen there. And then it goes on. What I'd like you to do next is when you find one of these things, I would like you to just ask some simple questions. If you go right across from comparison, there's the kinds of questions you should ask. What is being compared? And what does that mean? Now, I don't want you to answer the question. I just want you to ask the question, because that's the first step. Okay? The same with if you're interested in where these come from, there's what's called 5 W's and an H. You ever hear that? Yeah. 5 W's and an H. What, when, where, how, and why. How, the H. Okay? 5 W's and an H. This is where these questions come from. Now, suppose you're reading along the opposite, where you're looking at a contrast, and you see the word but. Something's being contrast. So you say, what is being contrast and what does it mean? It's the first thing you ask. Because that's the right question to ask about that contrast. Okay? And the second one is, what are the differences? Why does the author stress these differences? See? It's about why John said what he said, the way he said it, here, for you and me. There was a lot of thought and a lot of help with the Holy Spirit in writing this material. And it's done intentionally. It's just not thrown together as stories. It has structure. And the entire scripture's like this. Gary said this morning. You know, it's just not there. It just didn't happen. You know, it's historical, it's geographical, it's biographical. There's all kinds of doctrinal. There's all kind of important things related to how the scripture is structured. And in the Gospel of John, John, like I told you before, is a bit of a detail guy. He likes to tell you things that nobody else cares about, you know. But he wants you to know that he was there. He actually saw it, you know. So when his back got sore and he rode 7 miles, he said to you, I can't believe we rode 7 miles that day, you know. That kind of thing. Nobody else cares about that, you know. But he wants you to know the authenticity of it. Yes.
So can we do one together just to make sure that we know how to do it?
Sure. Okay.
I can give you an example.
Well, go ahead.
All right, so I would be looking at the contrast, number 2. So if we turn to John 8.
John 8, okay.
Verses, go to verse 54. So John 8:54.
8:54, okay. Let's go to 54. Okay, 52, 53.
So is it okay if I read it?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay, so John 8:54 says, Jesus answered, if I glorify myself, my glory is nothing. It is my Father who glorifies me, of whom you say, he is our God. But, there's the contrast. So, but you have not known him, I know him. If I were to say that I do not know him, I would be a liar like you, but I do know him and I keep his word.
Yeah.
So
Now,
what
the other thing that you need to know about that is some of the other texts may not use the word but. they may use although. But if you look up on your thing here, although is there. You see? So although, but, much, more, nevertheless, otherwise, yet, all those represent some kind of contrast.
Okay, so how would we go through that if we were asking these questions? So
All
you'd say,
right, you would see it there, you would know what chapter was that, it was an 8. You would, first thing I would do is I would go to my chart and I would look 8, 8, 8, bingo. Okay, so I know where it's at. It's in something having to do with opposition going on. There's some opposition going on. So I go back to my little paper that your handout, and I go to number 2, contrast, and I look across the questions, and I ask this: what is being contrasted, and what does it mean? You don't have to do all the homework, you just ask the right question. Because once you ask the right question, you'll get the right answer. One of the problems with getting the answers is that we don't ask the right questions. So that's the key. The key is asking the right question.
So what's being contrasted is Jesus is saying that Jesus knows the Father, but they don't know the Father.
Correct. All right? All right? Not that hard, huh?
Well, but so, do you keep going down the questions, or?
Oh, you can. You can ask as many of these as you want. Or you can pick the ones that you think are most important.
I like
Or you
the
can
one-
ask them all.
I like the one that says, why does the author stress these differences?
All right? Ask that question as well. Don't try to answer it. Just ask the question. That's the key. All right? Now, you'll have plenty of time to answer, because we're going to get deep into interpretation and that kind of stuff as we go along. All right? Any questions about this? Do you think you can do this? Just read through, pick some things out. You know, have a little fun with this. Okay? Now, you have another handout, don't you? That's probably two-sided, right? Right. Go to the side that says the often used approach in studying the scriptures. The often used approach. Now, what do we have here? This is basically how many Christians and others who do studies of the scripture approach the scriptures. And what they do is they start with an idea, a belief or a doctrine. Matter of fact, some really wild theorists use the same approach. They come up with an idea. Okay, I think God said we better watch out, he's coming back. I might predict when that is, maybe I won't. But that's an idea, right? So what do I do with that idea? I show how it applies. Boy, I better get ready. I better get ready. Matter of fact, if we're getting too close here to some serious situations, I may need to have to stockpile some things, you know, and make sure everything's fine. How that belief is being lived out, or how can it be lived out, okay? Then what I do is I go immediately into interpretation. I look for the meaning, I search the Bible for my idea. I get in there and I say, I know it's in here. It's just a matter of finding it. So I go to a concordance and I look up last days, eschatology, the coming of Jesus. You know, I find something, you know, and I get some Bible verses. I write them down and I say, told you, right? Then I do my observation. I quote the verse to everybody and I tell them, yep, it's there. The belief can be supported. There it is. That's how a lot of people do Bible study. What's wrong with that?
Backwards.
You're right, it's backwards, but why? I mean, what's wrong with it?
It doesn't necessarily reflect the author's intent.
There you go. Nor the Holy Spirit's intent. And a lot of things get taken, remember, out of context.
Right.
To prove that, it's called proof texting. You can prove anything by the Bible. You can prove that God hates children by finding the verses where children were slaughtered. And say, look at that. What kind of God is that? That's how people approach the scriptures. That's why it's dangerous. Let's look at what we're trying to do. The biblical approach to study the scriptures. Observation. You read the verses. Is it there? That's why I told you. I don't want you to interpret. I want you to see that it's there. Is it actually there? Okay, yes, it's there. Okay. Interpretation. You go for the meaning. The literary relationship. What did the author mean? Start asking interpretive questions about what you found. What kind of structure is that? See? Then you go to application. Now you can go to some application. Now that you got your interpretation down. Lifestyle. How do I practice this in my daily life? It's in the scripture. I know it's there. I've studied the verses. I know how they work. I know what the author's trying to do with it. How do I practice this in my life? And that results in my correlation of my belief and how I, or what I believe. That's the difference. And what I'd like us to do, and what John would like you to do, is look at his material, not with, I got my mind made up about what John has to say. Yep, I got it figured out. Because it's going to surprise you a lot as you go through this, which you'll see a little bit today. Any questions about that? See why we want to do it this way? So the Holy Spirit does what? The Holy Spirit can work with you. You see? When you do it this way, the Holy Spirit can work in your life and help you get the insight. As opposed to you hearing some idea or thinking up some idea and then trying to prove it by the Bible. Many people do that. There are even theologians and scholars who do that. So you have to make up your mind. And if Gary, what you heard Gary say this morning is true, which it is, about the scriptures, then you want to treat them with that kind of holiness and that kind of inspiration and that kind of honor. Because there is a right and wrong way. All right. Just for the sake of time here, how many have you ever had an opportunity to read what we talked about with the Synoptic Gospels? That little thing on page 1 in your notebook, right behind the front cover, page 1. There's a little section here that says additional information about John's Gospels. Did any of you get a chance to read through that little middle section? I just wanted to point out a couple things. I'm not going to do them all. I'm not going to read that whole section to you. But I just want you to know a few things. John does not spend a lot of time like Matthew, Mark, and Luke in the Synoptic Gospel, what we call the Synoptic Gospels. He does not spend a lot of time talking about the birth. Matter of fact, the birth, baptism, temptations, and transfiguration of Christ are not even discussed. Right? The other three Gospels do discuss those. There's no reference to that. John omits two major discourses, the Sermon on the Mount, and he omits the Olivet Discourse. Okay? Now, when I say something like that, do you know what I mean by that? What the Olivet Discourse is? Who knows what that is? Anyone know?
Say it.
Not of Olive.
The Olivet Discourse is 24 and 25 of John. And basically, it's about the last things.
I mean,
No. We're talking about in John. In John, he omits, yes, what's in Matthew, that's correct.
okay.
He admits what's in Matthew, and the Sermon on the Mount and all of the discourse, that's right. All right, there is some discussion later on, I got confused with the discussions later with the things that John brings up. but there are two major discourses not included in John. There are two. What about parables? What does it say about that? I think in that little section there, it says that it does bring up the parables in the synoptics. Well, it says there are 70 parables in the synoptics, but none in John. That's pretty significant, okay? And then there's 7 signs, which are miracles. But John calls them signs. Anybody want to take a stab at why he does that?
So that's number 7.
Huh?
Something.
What?
They had purpose and intention. There was a.
Absolutely. Purpose and intention. That's exactly why he does it. Okay? He just doesn't want to talk about, now Jesus does another miracle. You know, that's not what it's all about. There are 7 discourses. Why did he link 7 discourses together? Why do you think that's important? You see them on your chart? The discourses run from right around 2 the whole way into 11. 13. There's 7 of them. What are they about? Why would he do that? What's a discourse? Let's start there.
Conversation.
Conversation between Jesus and somebody. Something going on, okay? He does that because it's important to know detail. He's a detail guy. He wants you to see the information that Jesus actually discussed with the Pharisees. And what he actually said, and what they said back to him. So that you know what really happened. Very important. The other thing is just a bunch of discussions, like chapter 5, chapter 8, chapter 13 through 16, is the whole upper room discourse and discussion. Very, very important. That's all I want to say about that, but I do want you to know that Matthew, Mark, and Luke are very different from John. Okay? Agree on that? So you're not going to find the same things. Okay. Now, up on the board here, there are some things I want to remind us of. Abraham's major contribution, the Mosaic covenant, the Davidic covenant, and the new covenant. Remember we talked about that? I gave you a handout on it and all who was involved. That's coming alive now. Let me tell you what's going to happen. Abraham's major contribution in the new covenant is his thinking was his faith. It was all about his faith and how God justified him through faith alone and reckoned him to be righteous. Now, we're going to talk about righteousness in just a second. But the reason that's important is when I say faith, and John says faith, what's he talking about?
Believing God.
Belief. Belief. And I told you earlier, he's going to give you different levels of belief as you move through the book, right? Until you get to 28? Okay, the climax of the book. The belief that he wants you to have. Okay? That's where it should go in your life. So what he does, and there's another word that he uses, sometimes relating to belief, which is coming. Come and see. Come and watch. Come and get involved. He uses that word because coming will result in believing. All right? And believing is important. And that will result in faith. They're used interchangeably, especially belief and faith in the Gospel of John. All right? The second thing is the Mosaic covenant is rendered void in the new covenant. We'll talk more about that. And the Davidic covenant is fulfilled by emphasizing the kingdom of God and the throne upon which Jesus will sit in the new covenant. And the other focus is the new covenant represents God doing what you cannot do for yourself, and John calls that the louder
Gospel.
gospel. That's the gospel. Okay? What are the ingredients in the gospel? Here they are. Full regeneration. God gives you a new what? Heart. He gives you a new heart. Second of all, you're justified by faith. These are the ingredients. The law is now inside of you. It's not written on stone. It's written on your heart. We'll talk about that. Righteousness. You're clothed with Jesus' righteousness. You're going to have a transformed mind now. A new mind. It's going to look at things different. You become a, Paul says what? A new creation. You're a new creation. And then there's the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. We're free to do God's will in our life. Nothing can stop you. Jesus is the author and the finisher of that faith in you and me. Now, let's go back to our discussion on the gospel last week. The gospel is
Good news.
good news. It involves the cross and the resurrection. Romans 9:30 through 32 talks about righteousness. And just listen to what this says. What then shall we say? That the Gentiles who did not pursue righteousness have obtained it? That's us. They've obtained it. A righteousness that is by faith. By faith. But the people of Israel, who pursued the law as the way of righteousness, have not attained their goal. Why not? Because they pursued it not by faith, but as if they were by works, by keeping the law. And they stumbled over, John says, and so does Romans, over the stumbling stone. Who is the stumbling stone?
Christ.
Christ, correct. So Abraham was justified by faith through the faith alone. He was reckoned righteous. That's pre-law, by the way. There was no law around. He was reckoned righteous. And Ephesians says this. Here's Paul again. For it is by grace you have been saved through faith. And this is not from yourself. Hear that? This is not from yourself. It is a gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. Okay? So John believes, like I said before about you, that you and I are called people. We are called. Is that correct? Therefore, God has justified us by our faith. But, let's go back to righteousness. What about righteousness? The Jews believed the full development of righteousness was built on Moses, and he earned that righteousness. Now, there's a bit of a misinterpretation of Scripture there, wouldn't you say? Yeah. The interesting thing here is Moses and whatever righteousness that he had, how does that square with the new covenant? Doesn't matter. Right. It's null and void. The Mosaic covenant is null and void. Okay? Romans 3:20 says this. Therefore is causation. Okay? So therefore basically says, prior to what I said, here's the result. Therefore, no one will be declared righteous in God's sight by the works of the law. There it is. You see it. Rather, through the law, we become conscious of our sin.
It's a teacher.
That's it, that's what it is. It's the consciousness of our sin. That's what the law did for us. Okay? Question. So did God, how did God do it then? If we get rid of the law, so to speak, and the law is written in our heart, but basically, you know, we're not teaching the law, we're not praising Moses, we're not, you know, how does God do it? God made him who had no sin, Christ, to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. Here we are. We're clothed in that righteousness of Jesus, right? Now I'm going to ask you a serious question in a second. Abraham was a sinner like all of us, but God decided not to look at his sins. That's how it happened. God decided not to look at his sins because Jesus was going to impute his righteousness even to Abraham, who knew no sin, knowing, and Jesus knew that we would keep on sinning, and God knew that we would continue to sin. So the question is this: are you righteous? Careful how you answer the question. Are you righteous?
No.
No. Can somebody tell me why he's right?
We're all sinners.
None are righteous, no, not one.
All right, but why?
Because we're still a sinner.
We're still a sinner. That's correct. However, John wants you to know that when you, here it is, pursue faith in Jesus, when you pursue that, you have no righteousness of your own, and you and I have Jesus' righteousness. All right? So even our righteousness that is imputed to us at the cross, even that righteousness is not from us. Why? So we have nothing to boast about. We didn't bring anything to the table. Okay? That's the incredible reality of what we call justification by faith and imputation. You know what I mean by imputation? Some people call it double imputation, you know. Imputation meaning that Christ imputed, gave to us his righteousness. And in return, what did we give to him? Or what did God give him?
Death.
Death for us. We imputed our sin to him. He imputed his sin, his righteousness to us.
We use the word propitiation.
Yes, we do. That's right. That's right. Especially take communion, things like that. It's incredible. When you think about how God did this, this is incredible. He knew we weren't going to stop sinning. Because why? Who are we? We're human beings. I mean, let me just ask you this. What do we believe about the state of mankind? Who are we?
Reprobate.
Reprobate, sinner people, sinful people. We're going to keep on sinning. Romans 5, verse 6, 10, 12, 14, and 17. Talk about Adam imputing what to us? His death and his guilt. It's Adam. Adam started this mess. And we picked it up. Man thinks he can fix it. Now, I want to share this with you because this is sneaky. Sometimes we don't even know we're doing it. But we think we can fix it. Because what it's all about is just our choice. It's just about our choice. If we make a good choice, we choose Jesus. There we go. That takes care of it. No. It's not about our choice. It's not about behavior modification. What Adam did was imputed death and guilt and sin to us. We're not just corrupted. Because man, when he thinks he's corrupted, what's he say? I got a problem. I need help. I gotta get some help, you know? And I can get some help, and you know, I love Jesus, he's a good man, you know? I think he's all right, you know? I think if I get enough help, he and I can be buds. Isn't that how we think?
It's in our DNA.
It sure is, deep in our DNA. Yeah, and that's how we think. Let's reflect on some of the things we've talked about now. Because this is absolutely crucial to getting inside of the heart of Jesus. And we're going to talk about the heart of Jesus and you and me in just a minute.
I like chapter 8,
I know.
where it says, he without sin cast the first stone.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, that really is. Let me ask you a question. I'm going to take a chance with my arm here. If I want you to see this, that's the sovereignty of God, okay? That's God's sovereignty. That's the new covenant. I want you to see that. See that right there? New covenant. All right. But you want to show me that. That's what you want to show me. And I keep talking to you about this, and you keep showing me this. What's going on? Think Pharisee. This represents an understanding of the Messiah based on the law. This represents the new covenant. But the law is no longer valid. It's fulfilled in Jesus. Now we have an interesting situation. Jesus, every time he talks to the Pharisees, every time he gets involved in a discourse or an I am statement where he explains something about himself, we have this going on. Let me tell you about the sovereignty of God. Let me tell you about the gospel, what it's all about. Let me tell you about Moses. We're righteous through Moses. We worship the law. It's going like this. You know, they never seem to get it together. You know? There's a reason for that, and that's what I want to talk to you about. But those who have eyes to see, Jesus said in chapter 9, verse 5, we talk about the blind man who had no eyes, who was born without sight, ended up worshiping Jesus, the one who allowed him to see the light. Okay? The law didn't help at all. Didn't help at all. Matter of fact, what was the result? What happened to that guy?
He put out of the temple, I think.
Absolutely. You think right.
That's what
He was thrown out of the temple. Never to come back to worship. Just think, he was raised in that faith. How would you like it if Gary called you up and said, you know, I'm sorry, but the elders have decided to throw you out of church. Don't ever come back.
I wouldn't like it.
All right? That's exactly what happened to that man. The law did not help, but he saw the light. And we'll talk about that man later and some other exciting things. Okay? But those who had eyes could not see, Jesus said, or choose to see the light because they were committed to the darkness. That's what this is all about. We're always trying to fix ourselves because we don't want to live by faith and admit that God has fixed us. We always have to fix something more. Something more wrong with me, you know? I mean, if my mother were here, she would tell you that is the truth. The kid's got a lot wrong. But basically, you know, that's how it operates. So what we know about being under the old covenant, Moses and the law, regarding law, is it's null and void. That takes care of one, and it takes care of two. These will come along. We're going here now to 4, and we're going to talk more about this new covenant and the Pharisees' mind. We have to raise this question. The Pharisees obviously have their mind made up, right? They know who they worship. They worship the law and not the lawgiver. They know what's involved. But what I want you to see that John shows, and it's hidden, but I'm going to pull it out for you and let you look at it. All right? And here it is that the sovereignty of God and evil are working at the same time. And then I want you to draw this conclusion. I wonder if that could be happening to me. Where God's sovereignty is working with me, and evil is right there, giving me a tough time. All right? He'll point this out to you. Watch this. The Messiah has to be seen through the revelation of Jesus Christ only. That's the only way you can see the Messiah. I'm going to read something to you. Chapter 11, if you want to follow along. I'm going to go there. Somebody tell me, right away, what is chapter 11 about?
Lazarus dies.
Huh?
Lazarus dies.
Lazarus dies. What else happens in chapter 11?
The Pharisees plot to kill Christ.
There you go. That's where we're going to go. We're going to go right there. We're going to find out what would want them to kill a man who heals a bunch of people, gives them sight, is a real nice guy, gets along with almost everybody, you know, and preaches some really, you know, nifty sermons, so to speak, okay? Has some interesting conversations. Why would you want to kill this guy? And why would you want to kill some of the people that he helped? And why would you take a blind guy that now can see and worship in a different way and throw him out of the temple? Why would you want to do that? Very interesting thing. I'm going to talk about the evil plot that worked behind the scenes in John 11. So this is interesting. Let me read this. Then one of them, named Caiaphas, who was high priest that year,
What verse is it?
spoke up. This is chapter 11. I don't know what
Verse
verse it is
49.
because I don't have the verse.
40.
Okay. Then one of them, named Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, spoke up. And I want you to catch this phrase. You know nothing at all. And he's talking to the other Pharisees and Sadducees sitting there. You do not realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people than the whole nation perish under the Romans and all the rest of them. Let's talk about that. The primary character of evil since day one has always been manifested in pride. All right? All right? Pride thinks, evil thinks, pride thinks it can overcome God's kingdom in the Gospel of John, and the Gospel of John is going to show you how he failed miserably. Okay? Satan brings death, lies, killing, and he demonstrates his kingdom in the voice of Israel's high priest. You know nothing. Does that sound like a high priest talking to his friends and colleagues? Those guys are really smart. They're not dumb people. You mean you know nothing, okay?
They don't want to lose their job.
They don't want to lose their job. That's right. So what goes on here? He did not say this on his own, but as the high priest that year, now listen to these words carefully, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the Jewish nation. And not only for that nation, but also for the scattered children of God. And I think the high priest was referring to, or thought he was referring to, those who were in the dispersion, those who were taken off, remember, in the Old Testament, the 10 tribes that were taken off by Syria, and the 2 that were taken by Babylon, okay? To bring them together and make them one again. So from that day on, they plotted to take his life.
So he misinterpreted or didn't understand his own prophecy?
Yes, he understood it. Caiaphas accepts the evil plot. This is the work of evil behind the stage. And basically, he accomplishes it through murder, a mock trial, and putting Jesus on the cross with Pilate and some other people. Okay, Caiaphas' prophecy to accomplish the will he sets out for Jesus' ministry on the cross. Now, what I'm going to tell you is this. While that sounds terrible to us, the sovereignty of God thought that was a great idea. Not only did he think it was a great idea, but he allowed him to prophesy it. If I had to redo that prophecy, I would say it like this. Not the way evil would say it. Evil would say, if I can just get rid of the Son of God, then I can have my kingdom. That's all I got to do, get rid of the Son of God. All right? But basically what happened was the opposite. The sovereignty of God said, I've foreseen this already. And basically by getting rid of the Son of God, you sign your own death warrant. And that's exactly what happened. Evil was defeated at the cross. So he had no power to do what he thought he could do, build his kingdom and overcome God's kingdom with his kingdom. All he had to do was just get rid of Jesus. And God thought that was a great idea, simply because it was part of his sovereign plan. Now, we have evil working, we have God where Caiaphas accepts this. God permits evil and uses it for his plans. That's exactly what happens. And Ephesians 1:11 says, in him we are also chosen, having been predestined according to the plan of him who worked out all things. And that word all things there is what they call comprehensive sovereignty. All things means all things good and all things evil are all in the plan of God. Now I know people have problems with that because they like to go back and blame God for all evil, but God does not do evil. But he's able to take evil and make it part of his plan. And he has already initiated. So that gets us to an I am statement of Jesus. And I'm going to give you as much of this as I can. We'll pick the rest of it up next Sunday. But basically, the I am, the shepherd, the good shepherd, and the heart of Jesus. This is not a nice shepherd. It's not a nice shepherd story. It's not a nice parable. It's not a nice, whatever you want to call it, analogy or whatever. You know, let me talk to you about how it starts. Jesus said, I am the door. In other words, Jesus is the only access to God. Let me say that again. He's the only access to God. You'll see how this plot makes a difference as we move forward. Remember in Genesis how God had an angel with a sword, a flaming sword, to guard access to the garden? Okay? That's important. Another example of this same kind of thing is in the temple. What happened in the Holy of Holies in the temple where only the high priest can go in once a year and offer the sacrifice? What happened when Christ died on the cross?
The ribbon was ripped. Whatever the cover was.
The cover that covered that so you couldn't get in was ripped in two. What's that mean? What's that mean?
separation is gone.
That's right. That's right. There's no longer a separation between you and God. Jesus made it possible now for you to walk right into the throne room of the Holy of Holies. You don't need a priest, you don't need a preacher, you don't need anyone to do this. You have that access. All right. I always like at this point to read something to you from the Old Testament. I think you'll like this. I think you've heard it before, but it's going to mean a lot more to you now. So listen to this. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in paths of righteousness. Okay? For his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely, two things will follow you. Listen. Surely, goodness and mercy will follow you all the days of your life. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Think about that. Who said that? Who wrote that?
John.
David.
David.
Sorry.
David. Old Testament. Old Testament. Now we're catching up. John 9, 10, 9, and 12 through 12. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I, the thief being evil, I have come that you may have life and have it to the full or abundantly. Now, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. The hired hand that comes in to help out is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and he runs away. The good shepherd, says Jesus, that Jesus uses here, this good shepherd analogy comes out of Ezekiel 34. Write that down. Ezekiel 34. Where the God of Israel speaks as the chief shepherd who appoints an under-shepherd to look after the flock. But the shepherds that are out there, like the worthless shepherd of Ezekiel 11:17, Ezekiel 11:17, are denounced for being more concerned about feeding themselves, looking after themselves, slaughtering the best lambs, using the wool to clothe themselves than they are to feed and look after the sheep. Got any shepherds out there that are messing up like this? I think so. Therefore, God says he will remove those shepherds, and God himself will go find the scattered sheep, gather them back into the flock. He will tend to do all those who need care and will treat them like one shepherd, the servant David, and will feed them. What's the new flock? The new era is what? The church, the new covenant. This is the new covenant. This is what this is all about. I mean, trace this little thing. I had this written out someplace, and I'm looking for where I might have done that. He's really clever in terms of how Jesus, once again, shows how this all works. Well, basically, what it involves is that you go back to Genesis, and what happened in Genesis? Man got to make his own choices, right? He was out there doing his own thing. How did that go? Not too well. Okay. What came after that? Then we had a theocracy, right? Then we had a theocracy. God himself ruled over things, and man communicated with it. How did that go? Man found a way to botch that up. Then we had, look, God, we don't want you anymore. You're too tough to work with. We want a king. Everybody else out here has a king. We want a king. So, okay, Samuel, give him a king. Saul, how did that go? South, very quickly. Then we have David. Then we have Solomon. Not spotless people in their lives, but at the same time, things happened, and then we had sons. And how did that go? It ended up in the north and in the south, splitting and being captured by Assyria. God giving them over to those who were not able to deal with it. So Jesus said, I've had enough of the hired shepherds. God said, I'm sending my son. My son's going to be the shepherd. He's going to be right here with you. He is going to go to the cross. This is the gospel. He is going to do what you and I can't do for ourselves. He's going to get rid of sin in clothing us in righteousness, so that God himself will accept you. And then what he's going to do on top of that is he's going to raise from the dead and give you eternal life. So you're going to have eternal life as well. And what John wants you to see is the kinds of things this good shepherd is now doing for you. I'll just give you one example because we don't have a lot of time. I have two examples, but I'll give you one. I can give you two. The blind man, you already know the story. You know what happened with the blind man. Cast out of the temple. In John 9:35 through 41, right? Here's what the real shepherd does. When Jesus heard that he was thrown out of the temple, what did he do? What? Yeah, say that real loud.
He went and found him.
He went and found that man. And he brought him to himself. And he brought him into his kingdom. And he asked that man, do you believe? Do you believe in the Son of Man? Do you believe in me? And the guy said, tell me, sir, who is he? It's the one who gave you your vision. It is me. I'm the Son of Man. Do you believe? He said, yes, Lord, I believe. And he fell on his knees and he worshiped Jesus. Didn't need the temple anymore. See how this works in the new covenant? Didn't need the temple anymore. He didn't say, okay, now go to the temple and tell the Pharisees that everything's cool. No. We're past that now. So, basically, the other one was Lazarus. Oh, by the way, the blind man had to do with John's theme on light, right? But the other one has to do, Lazarus has to do with John's theme on life. Okay? So what do we have here? Jesus is deeply moved to tears over his friend, goes to the tomb, and calls out Lazarus. That's who you are, the called people, the believing people. He called out the believer. He called out Lazarus. He called his faith. He brought his faith back and he gave him life. This is what he does. This is what the new shepherd does, the shepherd of the new covenant. He really cares. Just listen to the benefits. The three biggies. He voluntarily laid down his life at the cross, declaring his Father's mission was finished. Voluntarily. He said, no one tells me to lay down my life. You know, there's an absurd group of theologians today that are out there telling people in theological seminaries, and then there's young men that are coming back into churches and saying, well, this thing could be true, that Jesus was an abused son. But just what kind of father sends his son to the cross to accept all the death and the torture and the things that went on? What kind of God is that? They missed the point, didn't they? Big time. Jesus said, I want you to know, because God is sovereign, he does know that group of theologians are going to be out there today, and he took care of it now. And he said, I want you to know, no one takes my life from me. No one. I lay down my life voluntarily for you, my flock, because I love you. And my Father told me I can lay it down and I can take it up if I want to. And it's a command from my Father. So he solved that problem real quickly, didn't he? Knowing that this would happen. This is the kind of stuff that happens. The second thing is he loves us enough to stay on the cross. People don't talk much about that in the gospel. But you know, there were legions of angels ready to come rescue him. It does say that. But he said, I'll stay here. He stayed there. He finished the job that had to be done. What kind of love is that? Then the resurrection. Power over death and life. That's the third one. Power over death and life. So this shepherd is the only one I know or read about in Scripture who forgives sins. He has power over nature and diseases. He's able to cast out demons. He lived a perfect life with no sin in the flesh. And is exclusively the way, the truth, the light, and the life. And that word life is a very interesting word. Because when Jesus laid down his life, it wasn't Zoe, the Greek word where we get our concept of zoology and life, that kind of life. He didn't use that kind of life. The Greek word that's used there is totally different. It's suke. Anybody know what that is? Suke is soul. He laid down his soul, his whole soul for us. That's what John is he's gonna drill this into you with all the examples along the way. That he gave up his soul for us. And why? Because the essence of you and I, what's our essence? It's our soul. In order for the Father to see his wrath fulfilled, he went all the way. So in John 10:17 through 18, the reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down or take it up. This command I received from my Father. So here's the conclusion. The heart of God gives access to our salvation and his kingdom. He is the only access. He's tired of everybody else trying to lead us and us following gospels that don't make sense. So he has decided to come lead us himself. He's going to get involved. He lays down his life in a substitutional way, out of love. No other reason. And thirdly, he unifies us. He brings us into one together. And this is where Caiaphas was dead wrong. There are some scholars that think, yeah, it was those dispersion people that Jesus was coming, bringing together. No. He was putting together his church. The Gentiles and the Jews will come together and be one church, one flock, under one shepherd. And I will heal them, I will take care of them, I will love them, I will make sure that they make it. No one, he'll say later, can snatch them out of my hand. I've got them, I love them, and I'm going to take care of them. Exciting. Notice the contrast with the other guy. The guy who's trying to establish his kingdom, stealing, lying, murdering. Let me end with this verse. John 8:44. You are of your father the devil. This is what he said to the Pharisees. And you want to do the desires of your father. He was a murderer from the beginning. Say, and does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. Whenever he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own nature. For he is a liar and the father of all lies. Do you catch the sovereignty of God? And how we really bring nothing to the table in all of this? How it really works in a way that makes sense, so that God has provided everything we need for our healing, for our growth, for our spiritual life, and for our eternal life, and to live here. And he is not going to entrust us anymore to any other shepherd. He's going to be your shepherd. And that's the key to I am the good shepherd. That's what he means by that. Okay? Make sense? Questions? That's a lot. A little heavier today than usual. But from now on, it's a little lighter. So that's a new bit. All right? So does that make sense to you? We get that? You need to remember who you are and whose you are. That's the key. All right? Let's pray. Thank you, Father, for another good day of life. We thank you. You're our shepherd. That we can go to you with anything, and you hear us. We don't have to do all the behavior modification and make all kinds of right choices. We just need to know Jesus. Help us to pursue Jesus with all the faith that we have.